Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited that you're going to be joining us for today's webinar on Chamber Foundations. As you heard just a minute ago, my name is Casey Steinbacher, and I want y'all to know that I am leading this conversation today, not so much as a Chamber Foundation expert, but more as a Chamber Foundation participant and user over the years. In addition to serving in those chambers that have used the creation of a foundation as a tool for their work, I've also served as a member of the ACCE Chamber Foundation for many years, matter of fact, 2 terms over my tenure. And last year had the opportunity and privilege, quite frankly, to chair the process of creating ACCE Foundation's first real strategic plan. I also have a lot of experience working with philanthropic foundations nowadays in my Casey's company work. So I'll try and help you today see this work through their eyes a little bit today, not just through the chamber eyes. I also want to be really clear that today's webinar is a second or third in a series of conversations that ACCE has been having on the concept of chamber foundations. And it really is a follow-up to a great e-course that was produced in 2019 called Chamber Foundation Basics, Creating a Foundation. That webinar is available in the ACCE bookstore, and you, after today's presentation, you'll see at one of the last slides, there's actually a link to that page for your reference, along with some other great things that ACCE has done on this topic. So I just want to reiterate to you that in that presentation, there's some really great content around state laws and steps to incorporate and how to apply and maintain the tax status necessary for foundations, all that really important regulatory and legal work that needs to be done. And specifically around what the ongoing relationship between the Chamber's 501c6 and your new foundation's 501c3 organization is. That's really important work and information for all of you to know and do ahead of time. So I just wanted you to be aware, I will not be covering any of that today. If you do not have a foundation, or you are on staff of a chamber that has a foundation but doesn't necessarily have any experience in its operations, I really highly recommend that you take the time to go to the bookstore, purchase the e-course. Because like everything ACC does, it is really full of samples and links and relevant documents that will be really helpful as you think through the creation of one. And if you already have one, to remind yourself about all those requirements. But I also don't want you to worry that if you haven't taken that webinar yet, you will still get some really good content from today's webinar that's really equally as important to you as you think about whether or not you're moving forward to create a foundation or reinvigorating the one that you have. The chambers that really think long and hard about the strategic opportunities that a foundation can bring and really start with that intention in mind are the ones that I've seen over the years that really create the greatest value. So strongly encourage you to think strategically in addition to programmatically. So let's get started on today's webinar. Here, next slide is really letting you know what it is we're going to cover with you this afternoon. We're going to talk a little bit about the historical uses of foundations by the chambers over the years and give you some examples of how that has evolved from when chambers first got involved in foundations to today's chambers and today's chamber work. I'll walk you through what my experience has shown to be the advantages and disadvantages of creating a chamber foundation. And then we'll spend some time on the real meat of this webinar, which is really the importance and value of the strategic alignment of the plan with the chamber's plan. If you learn nothing in this webinar, I hope you learn that, because that is the essence of what we're going to talk about. I'm going to give you some specific examples of how that played out in some ACC chamber members that I hope will illustrate why that's important and what the real opportunity is in being impactful in your chamber foundation work if you do that right from the beginning. And then finally, I'll walk you through the basics of how you articulate the case statement for your foundation and the strategic plan that supports it. And I'll be using a lot of what we've done at the ACCE Foundation to show you how to do that. So let me just say that the value of this webinar is the conversation itself, guys. I put together some really basic slides to keep you from falling asleep, but I'm perfectly fine if you want to just put the headphones on, lean back in your chair and listen for a while, as opposed to following along the slides. You will get them later on, as you heard. So listen however it works for you. So let's get started. Chamber Foundations, the early years. So what we as chambers have historically used foundations for in the past. Let's talk about that. Unlike Oprah, as you see here, it's not been to give away cars. But early on, it did have that same philanthropic feel to it. Chamber foundations then were created to really provide a methodology for corporate members to provide funding for some pretty traditional community needs in a way that was viewed as philanthropic by the community, but really was the opportunity for them to engage in that work with ease and with the cover that a chamber foundation would provide. So what do I mean by ease and cover? Well, ease means when you're a large corporate employer in a community, a lot of times you get hit up for a lot of requests. And when the chamber is able through their foundation to kind of use the foundation as an opportunity to aggregate those requests, like for instance, scholarships. Let's use community scholarships. Early on, that was a big thing that local chambers were involved in. How do we help students pay for college? And this was a real way by the companies had an opportunity to really just write one check. They wrote one check to the chamber, and the chamber gave them cover from the perception of the chamber had the process in place for determining who got those funds. They were the ones that actually did the due diligence on the disbursement of the funds. And so it was a real easy, simple way for chambers to utilize foundations to support the philanthropic needs that corporations really needed to meet. And it was a real easy way for them to actually be engaged with local residents, which we all know is important. They did that through scholarships for college, community college, professional development, all kinds of opportunities for kids. Over time, we started to see chambers really morphing into using their foundations for bigger use of dollars, bigger use of opportunities for them. That still gave them that same ease and cover. And this came really, quite frankly, in a lot of capital projects. Usually these were larger public projects, but sometimes they were a nonprofit kinds of work around capital projects. In your communities, for instance, I'm sure somewhere along the line there was some community funding, some foundation funding around community museums and art centers, a new facility for the Boys and Girls Clubs, something along that line. The Chamber Foundations really became that mechanism for public contributions, and again provided a mechanism for the chamber to be that curator, so to speak, of all of those asks in the community. And so it once again was relatively easy for a corporation to do it, and they trusted the chamber to be that curator, so they knew that that give was for a good cause. And it really worked for the chamber, quite frankly, because it gave the chamber an important role to play for both the contributing corporation, the contributing company, and the community at large. And so again, it was a really great use of foundations. Today, however, what we see chambers really gearing up and using their foundations, or if you don't already have a foundation, creating your first foundation, is way more in line with the bigger community impact work that chambers of commerce are doing. We know for a fact that chambers now have to engage in community work. We know that if we're all about as business organizations ensuring the prosperity of our community, and all of us somewhere along the line and something that we've written in some sort of mission or value or strategic plan, we talk about the prosperity of a company. of the community, we know that in order to be able to do that, we need to be able to be helping create and sustain jobs, and those jobs are critically dependent upon our ability to create and retain and attract talent. And we know that creating and attracting and retaining talent is absolutely dependent upon our community to be the kind of communities that that talent wants to live in. So we know that we've had to step forward and play in that space at a much higher level and engage in activities that help create the kind of communities we want, address the barriers to those communities being effective. And so we've got pretty robust community impact work that we're trying to do. And the Chamber Foundation really has become a very strong vehicle for us to do that work. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But before we do, I just want to take a step back. I want to talk a little bit about what are the advantages and disadvantages before I get you excited about all the great things a Chamber Foundation can do. It's really important that you think about this from the perspective of your capacity as an organization to actually play in the foundation space. So advantages. It clearly, and I think I've just demonstrated a couple of examples for you, it clearly demonstrates that you can leverage your resources for a bigger collective impact. And what do I mean by that? Well, there's a whole bunch of things around that. It really provides flexibility for your members in terms of how they give and what buckets they're actually able to give in. It gives them philanthropic options that they may want to play in, that they are looking for the Chamber to continue to provide ease and cover for them to be impactful in the community and be able to leverage their dollars with other corporate dollars for a much bigger impact. And the Chamber provides that backbone, so to speak, for that kind of activity. It also creates lanes of engagement for non-traditional partners. And I say that to you because at the ACC Foundation level, and quite frankly, in a lot of chambers across the U.S., what we're finding is that philanthropic organizations are finding this community impact work that chambers are working on as valuable work and really want to be engaged in it. So they start to see your organization as someone that can also serve their purpose and are interested in actually engaging with you in that. Obviously, when you do this kind of work, it brings with it the kind of community recognition that chambers of commerce really need and want to ensure their relevancy with their members. And it also allows you, quite frankly, this is I don't think something that's talked about a lot, but from my perspective, allows you a lane to continue leadership engagement. A lot of chambers populate their boards of their chamber foundations with past chairs and past community leaders who understand the community challenges and can really help focus the work in a way that makes a lot of sense and gives them a continuing voice in the work that you're doing. So what are some of the disadvantages? Well, once you take that e-course that I just talked to you about, you will find that while it's not very difficult to create a foundation, it is very regulated, and you do have to do it right. This e-course will, I think, really hand you the package to do that in a way that will make it very easy for you to stay on the right side of how to do this. And but you do need to understand that there are very specific requirements as you create this and as you actually execute it. There is some additional costs associated with it, not a ton in terms of operationally. There is oftentimes an additional accounting and audit fee associated with it. Some actually do it as part of their chamber audit. Some do it separately. There's also additional governance around it. It will require a separate board of directors, and it will require the governance around that board of directors. So as chambers, we know what that's like, having another entity that we have to manage and make sure we're working collaboratively with. And what I mean by competitive rather than complementary, the other thing that I will tell you that is when you are playing in community work and you're funding community work through a foundation, while it has all these other advantages inside the chamber world of being able to be collaborative with other corporate members, it can put you in a competitive nature with some of your nonprofits in the community that are also are looking for funding from these same companies or from these same philanthropic sources. So understanding that you want to make sure when you go into this that you think about how you play a more complementary rather than a competitive role, I think is really important from the beginning, and something a lot of chambers get caught not necessarily recognizing, especially chambers that have high levels of nonprofit organizations as members of their organization. So understand that you want to make sure that you are working with them, not against them, when you're creating these foundations. So let's get to the real purpose of this webinar, and that is strategic alignment. The last thing you want to do as a Chamber of Commerce looking to create a foundation is think about this as a revenue stream. Does it create revenue streams? Hell yeah, it creates revenue streams. But that is a byproduct of what it is you're doing. It is not the purpose for why you do that. And what I've stated here on the screen is what I like to tell people. Really, the purpose for creating it should always be as a tool to support the purpose and work of the Chamber's strategic community impact work. It accomplishes that by being a vehicle. So foundations are vehicles to support the strategic community impact work that your chamber is actually doing. And it does that by engaging your business members, your community, and your organization in that work. So I get asked a lot, what really does that mean? What does it mean to have strategic alignment? And what does it mean that the foundation actually helps execute that strategic alignment? Well, it's important to have this conversation because understanding what the Chamber strategic plan is isn't just an automatic pick it up and now this is my foundation strategic plan. Because remember, when you're doing these strategic plans for your organization, it's for your organization. So a lot of times there are internal or programmatic pieces that reflect specifically in areas that are not engaged in your community impact work. What you really need to do is think long and hard about how you use it for the key areas of your community impact work and what the foundation's role is in actually being able to help with that. So let me give you a couple of examples. I happen to believe that there's two real ways that I've seen in my experience for how chambers have really had the opportunity to align the strategy work of the chamber with the execution work of the foundation. And it falls into three buckets, actually. I list them there as two: intentionality and opportunity. But quite frankly, most good chambers are both. So a third one would be both. And I'll give you an example of these and what it is I mean. When I have down here the Kentucky Chamber, if you know anything about the Kentucky Chamber, its strategic initiatives have always been incredibly high-level public policy and research focused on the best ways to impact change for the business community and the growth in Kentucky. Their famous Leaky Bucket initiative is a really great example of that, and they use that to help state lawmakers, really see a more holistic human side of how their budgeting impacted communities. It really resulted in some groundbreaking work in criminal justice reform that a lot of state chambers now are trying to replicate. But through this process of engaging in high-level public policy work around very specific issues that affected local communities, it really became evident to the chamber that just doing the research was important because it helped create the sense of urgency around what the issues were. But more importantly, they then started to recognize that the foundation actually was an opportunity for them to create solutions around these big community issues. that affect the business ability to be successful and the community's ability to be successful. And they saw the foundation as a way to actually take what they were doing and create a bigger impact. So with their foundation, if you actually would go on their webpage, and by the way, I have a bunch of links at the end of this that'll help you. If you go on their webpage, you'll see that the Kentucky Chambers on their About page, it'll say that the Kentucky Chambers Foundation works to bring economic, education, and workforce initiatives to our state that provides impact beyond the business community's normal reach. And so what they are saying by this is it's still the traditional work of what is really important to create prosperity in our community, but we're doing it in a way that's going to allow us to be that much more impactful in the work. So if you actually get a chance to go on their site, you'll see what they've done. So with all of that research that they've done, they've actually now created potential solutions. They have a workforce development center where they've taken the work that they've done around talent and the needs in workforce development and created a center that is actually creating solutions for the community in that initiative. They've taken all of their work in education and turned that into a leadership institute for principals that they run through their foundation and is funded through their foundation. And one of my favorite things they do is a thing called Slam Dunk Kentucky. And that is a really creative way in which they've created a space for not just traditional people interested in helping ensure that everybody in Kentucky is benefiting from the prosperity of Kentucky. They provide voices around how we can get more kids through school, how we can get more companies to engage in workforce development, a whole bunch of different ways to actually bring different voices together. If you talk to Dave Atkinson, the former CEO of the Chamber, he will tell you that it has been so successful now that it's actually becoming a place where corporations actually request their money to be put into. I give you this as an example of a very intentional alignment of here's what my chamber does, here's what's important to my chamber, and here's how I'm going to very intentionally use my foundation to actually be more impactful in creating solutions and funding solutions around these activities. Another example I want to share with you comes around the concept of opportunity. So as you're aligning the work that it is you're doing with your chamber, and as you're learning how to do this work, it's both intentional, I'm setting it up to actually be this, and it's also very opportunistic. So a really great example, I love Lancaster Chamber really a ton for a whole bunch of reasons, not the least of which that they have been on the forefront of really playing around with the whole concept of what is the new operating model for chambers of commerce. This whole, are we still a membership organization or are we not? And from the perspective and the lens of not how do we make more money or how do we do this in a way that makes sense, from a perspective of looking through the lens of how do we create an organization that really creates greater impact into the community. And over the last 3 or 4 years, they've been piling a bunch of ideas, and they've landed on one that is way less membership restrictive and way more open to engaging and supporting the community as a whole. And without getting into a lot of detail on that, let me just say that as a result of that model, their new strategy is going to be, and is currently and will continue to be, far more impactful and outreaching in the community, far more inclusive, a lot more services and programs. And as they work through that, they came to the realization that they didn't really have the level of infrastructure in place to actually be able to serve that greater demand that they were expecting that they were going to actually produce. And a big piece of that lack of infrastructure was their facility. So now you get right back to the old concept of capital campaigns and how you use chamber foundations and capital campaigns. But in Lancaster's case, they did not necessarily set in their strategic plan a specific objective around a new facility originally. But through the process of actually determining their new model and that they were looking to create this greater impact, the need for a new building became a really important part of the solution for that strategy. And therefore, their existing foundation became the perfect vehicle to make that happen. And if you look on their webpage, or if you talk to people in Lancaster, no one saw the campaign for a new building as a capital campaign for a new office for a chamber, the chamber. But instead, they really had an opportunity then to take that capital need and build it into this bigger community model and this bigger community impact strategy that they had. And they viewed the capital campaign for a building as a necessary piece to achieving that. So it ended up being incredibly successful. They moved into that new building at the end of mid to end of 2019. It's a phenomenal facility, and they're doing really, in my opinion, game-changing things in it. And foundation was really an opportunistic vehicle to create a brand new facility for the chamber and at the same time create a greater impact. Now, I'm not saying that you have to be either or. I said that a minute ago, intentional or opportunistic. You really can and should be both. And I think the real lesson that I'm trying to help with here is that if you align it right with the strategic plan and if you're very intentional about that, it automatically becomes an opportunistic vehicle for greater impact. And a great example of that is the ACC Foundation. And I'm going to share a little secret with you about the ACC Foundation. So I am going to age myself in this conversation by telling you I was around on the board of the ACC Foundation decades ago when it first got started, and remember sitting around in board meetings worrying about were we going to have enough money to provide scholarships to all of the people coming to our conference every year. We viewed ourselves as a strong professional development organization and wanted to ensure that a lot of people got there, and we really needed to figure out how to make sure that we provided scholarships. Along the way, ACC grew with you as chambers and started figuring out that part of what they needed to do is lead these conversations around what the trends in chamber work was going to be. A big part of that trend in chamber work has been the work that all of you are doing in community impact, in education, in workforce, in criminal justice, in shared prosperity, in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they decided that they needed to really start thinking hard about that, and they made a brilliant decision a couple of years ago to join with the Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce, who has an amazing foundation that's probably larger than all of the chambers I've ever worked for put together. And they're excellent at doing this. And they entered into a contract with LA to have LA help them identify opportunities for funding to create programs that would help our members be more impactful in this work. And needless to say, over time, that has resulted in a very robust ACC Chamber Foundation that has now gone from, $35,000, $50,000 of scholarship to millions of dollars in philanthropic support and corporate support to help the work that we do for all of you. Last year, actually, we took a deep breath and said, okay, this is great. We're growing like crazy, and these programs all are really, really important, but we got to take a step back and really start thinking about how we do this work a little bit better, and took the time to do a strategic plan for specifically the foundation to specifically help ACCE's strategic plan be more effective. So what I want to do here in a minute in these next slides is kind of give you and walk you through what that process looked like. It won't be detailed. It'll be really high level, but it'll give you a sense of the kind of things as you start thinking about this, what that looks like. So the slide you're looking at right now is a slide called a case statement. A case statement is what a lot of foundations will do in order to better describe their foundation and its purpose, specifically to be able to link to the appropriate potential funding sources that also find the work that's listed here valuable to them. So what a case statement does is it does a couple of things. It starts with, who are we? So we had to start first as we are the Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives we improve the capacity of chambers of commerce to engage business leaders and community stakeholders in the pursuit of sustainable, inclusive economic growth. Okay? That's who we are. That's what we were funded. That's what we were started for, and that's what we want to do. What we do, we actually help chambers of commerce do that work. Now, you'll see in there that we list those things that are important, and we did that for a reason. We don't just say to do that work. We say, here's the work that we talk about when we say inclusive economic and sustainable growth, because we are writing this for potential partners and funders, and we want them to see that kind of work. Then we talk about how do we do that? Well, we do it as an ACC Foundation by funding programs in these areas. Okay, these areas help these peer-to-peer learning, these leadership development, help our chambers do the work that we just described to you in the paragraph above better, right? And then the all important, why do we do these? We do this, which is our last statement there, we do this at the forefront of our work is the belief that a growing, inclusive economy provides meaningful employment opportunities and thriving for communities for all residents. As you think about how you create your foundation, setting up the who, the what, the how, and the why allows you to also basically create a megaphone to funders to say, this is what we do and who we are, and if you're doing this same kind of work, we really want to engage and partner with you. So it's a great beginning step. The next step, which is the next slide, and I'm not going to talk too long on this because I'm trying to be cognizant of time here and leave time for questions, is the actual strategic plan. How you align the foundation plan. Again, remember, now we're talking about the creation of the foundation strategic plan and how you align that with the chamber's plan for the community impact. What we did in our particular case, and what a lot of chambers do, is they look at the chamber strategic plan and they identify the key overarching goals of the chamber that really matter in the community work, in the community impact work. What are those overarching goals that they're really looking to address? And then secondly, which of those goals that they're looking at does this foundation actually work as a vehicle for success for them? All right. Now, my caveat to that underneath this is that never forget that when you take this e-course that I know every one of you are going to go take and purchase from the bookstore, you will find out that an important part of what you do when you actually create your foundation, for those of you that haven't, and as a reminder to those of you that do have it, is that you need to align those activities not just with the chamber, but with your specific original filing purpose. Did you file around economic development, education, workforce development, those kind of things? What is the broad definition of the work that you as a foundation said are important? And then how do those key overarching goals that you've identified in the community impact work actually align with them? And which of those align with the greatest impact to the work and the chamber? So sometimes what your foundation is created for at the moment in each individual strategic plan has a very specific, as we talked about it, intentional alignment, and some of them don't. Some of them come along later as an opportunistic opportunity for you as a chamber to use the foundation as that vehicle. But if you've actually go through this process every year, look at that plan. What are the arching goals? How is the foundation best positioned to help? Which one is the foundation best positioned to help? And specifically this year, where do we think that we can really be the most impactful within what it is that we were formed to do, is really the key questions and key issues you have to address as you work through your strategic plan. And then the second thing that I would say to you is really important that we did at the ACCE, and I think has been also incredibly impactful on our ability to be successful, is really creating a plan after that, the execution strategy. How do we actually work this plan? ACCE, up until recently, had no dedicated staff to its foundation. It relied on its board, and it relied on the chamber staff that were currently in other roles, which was important because those roles really inform the work to come in and actually help run the foundation. And in this year, as part of the strategic plan, we've identified very specific positions that we would like to ensure we're engaging in creating as part of our work, execution strategy in the work. And we talked specifically about how we can, over the next 12 to 36 months, what are the opportunities for us to collaborate with other philanthropic and corporate partners, foundation partners that are really looking to engage in this work. So it really is an execution strategy for the work we've outlined, but the work that we've outlined is the work specific to the community impact work of the chamber we're associated with. So I know I've talked ad nauseum about alignment, but that is the purpose of this conversation. It is in every instance that I've seen in chamber work, when the alignment is right, the chamber foundation prospers and the chamber work gets funded. And at the end of the day, guys, that's what this is about. It's about getting the work, the really important community impact work that you want to do, funded in a way that is appropriate and impactful. And this foundations are becoming a really big tool for that. On the slide I have in front of you, I just wanted to point out that ACCE has resources available as members for you to participate and take advantage of. The first one, the Chamber Foundation Basics, that is on that page, is the product that I was talking about earlier that can be purchased in the bookstore. The remainder, the Chamber Impact, Build on a Strong Foundation, and some of the other fundamentals that are recording are free and available. I believe some are not, some are, but all of them are available in the library. And Susan, I'm sure, will clear that up if I made any mistake on saying what is available and isn't available. I've also thought it would help for you guys, just go take a look at some chambers that are doing this work. I've tried to put a couple in there that are chambers that are state chambers, metro chambers, major chambers, smaller chambers, and a little bit of geography here. There's a lot more than this, but these are ones that I happen to be familiar with that are really leading the charge in aligning the work of the community and of the chamber and with the foundation, and are being super successful in that work. So with that, I just want to thank all of you for joining us today. I am happy to help any of you in any capacity that I can. Please understand, again, Casey's company is not a company that does foundation planning work, but I understand, because of the place-based economic development, community development, talent development work that I do understand the importance of foundation in doing the work, and will be happy to answer any questions that I can, or point you to any other organizations or research that will help you, do what you need to do better. So with that, Susan, I am going to be quiet and let you take over.
Okay, well, thank you, Casey, for that wonderful overview. And as Casey indicated, that slide that she showed, I guess the second to last slide, does have other ACCE resources on it. If you click, the link should be active. If you click on them, it'll take you right to the resources, the recorded webinars and convention sessions, slides, and so on. So please feel free to click on those and investigate other parts of our ACCE website, where we have lots of information on foundation and revenue topics as well. So now we will take some questions, and as I indicated before, just type in your question in the question box, which is in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. I will read the question to Casey, and she will answer it. And we have a couple already, Casey. The first one says, there are entities that claim that they, quote, find, unquote, funding for foundations, keeping a percentage of each grant. Are these legitimate, and are you aware of any good ones?
I am not aware, unfortunately, whether there are any good ones or not out there. Most of the chambers that I'm familiar with do that work themselves. However, I will tell you that that basically was the relationship that we had with LA Chamber. We actually, they actually did our grant seeking for us. And as a result of that, we shared the grant and resources associated with that. So it's not unusual. It can actually happen, but I am not aware of companies that do that. I will write that down though, and do some research and see if I can track that down for you.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, do most chambers allow funds donated to their foundation come from non-members, or do the donors have to be members?
Everyone does it differently, but there is no requirement in creating a foundation that says that only the funds that can come in from the chamber. That would be something that the board of directors, as the governing agency of that foundation, would have to make. I would say to you, the vast majority of chambers that I'm aware of use this to create funds to do their work, and they are not restricted into where those funds come from.
Okay, that is all the questions. Oops, one just popped up. What do operating agreements between foundations and their chamber typically look like? Formal versus informal, contract versus MOU?
Good question, and I would say to you that the e-seminar that we talked about earlier will actually give you some good samples of that. They should be formal contracts, formal agreements. It doesn't have to be huge contracts, but formal agreements that spell out how that relationship works. That can be I, as a foundation, am purchasing services of existing staff. That can be I'm paying for office space, whatever it is. It 100% should be spelled out as part of the legal compliance requirements of the foundation its engagement with a 501c3 versus a 501c6. So yes, there are documents and in that seminar that will actually lay that out for you, and I would strongly suggest that you take a look at them.
Okay. There's a question about chamber membership investment levels, and there's two questions, but I think one builds on the other. When you're looking at chamber membership investment levels, do some chambers bundle investments that would, I guess, come from foundation and membership investment together when they're recognizing a particular membership investment level? In other words, can foundation donations or contributions count as that?
You know, there's kind of like two questions in there. So the question becomes, can you do that? And how does it work? So basically what a lot of chambers, the money that comes into the foundation to support the specific work that the foundation says it's going to do. And so from that perspective, it is 100% funding the work. A lot of chambers will have them do both, like write a separate check to the chamber for a foundation and engage in the foundation. Sometimes that works easy because chambers or corporations now have their own foundations that can support this kind of work or not. I would say to you that there is no model one way or the other. I could tell you that most of the chamber execs that I know don't. If they're able to create enough funding inside the foundation to actually execute the work that needs to be done, and as part of the work that needs to be done, you're funding, the cost associated with that work. It really doesn't matter, right? So it really becomes how that works for you and to your organization. Most of them will do it both, but some of them will do 100% will go directly to the foundation and will not come into the Chamber of Commerce. So it really depends on how you structure the foundation and you structure the chamber. What work is the foundation doing for you, and what work is the chamber doing for the foundation? So it's not a question of membership, really. It's a legal conversation around how the work gets purchased.
I think also, Casey, Kathy, who's asking the question, wants to know if you can be recognized for, or is it typical, or does it ever happen, that you can be recognized for a particular investment level, a particular tier, based on foundation contributions in addition to membership investment. And Kathy, you may want to also ask Dave Atkinson this, who is going to be presenting at our sales conference, who I believe spoke to this in some conversations that we've had at convention about it. So he will also have a perspective on it. But anyway, Casey, any other thoughts on that?
Well, my first thought is Dave Atkinson is the exact right person to be asking that question to. He's really created a foundation that really allows its chamber members to really play heavily in the community impact work. Can you do it? Can you do that? Of course you can. Understand that is a chamber recognition. That's a designation. What you're saying to me is, can I, as the XYZ chamber, say that you're now a platinum member because you paid us $10,000 for membership and you contributed $50,000 to the foundation? Yeah, there's no legal requirement there. That platinum level is a designation you created, and you get to decide who's there or not there. I think from the perspective of, do chambers do that? I think a lot of Dave is a great person to ask this to. I think he found that the chamber, that corporations were way more interested in funding the work of the foundation, and as a result of that became foundation platinum, so to speak. You don't really do that, but they really acknowledged the Kentucky Chamber itself acknowledged the money that went into the foundation as equally important as the money that went into the Chamber of Commerce. I don't know how he designated that. That's a good question for Dave, but he'll be able to answer that for you moving forward. It's also a good question to ask Tom Baldridge, because with his campaign, there was actually a capital campaign. And so traditionally what chambers will do in a capital campaign is acknowledge someone participating in that campaign as a capital donor. And so I think basically what chambers are really doing is they're finding ways to acknowledge them differently, but they're acknowledging them.
Okay, thanks, Casey. And then the final question is a simple one. It says, what could make a chamber foundation really cool? If you have any other thoughts on that.
Oh, that's a great question. What can make a foundation really cool? I happen to think that what can make a foundation incredibly cool is, number one, being really impactful. But I think what can make an impact is understanding that what they're working on in terms of the community impact is long-term, which means their customer are youth. Engaging youth on the board, engaging youth in how you make decisions on where that impact is going to be played out, I think is a really cool way to show the community that you are, as a chamber, and you are, as a community, there for the long haul.
Okay. And Adam, who asked the question, says, thank you. And that's a great one to end on, too. So I don't see any more questions. We have a few more minutes if you all think of anything else. But in the meantime, just a reminder that we're recording this webinar, and I will send you all the link to the recording within the next 2 business days, so no later than Monday. And I will also send a copy of Casey's presentation slides as well that have the links in it to other resources and information and websites and so on. And a reminder that our next ACC University webinar is going to be next week, Thursday, February 27th at 2. We will be presenting our Winter 2020 ACC e-tour. So join us for a short tour, half an hour, to learn how to navigate the ACC website, to find the information most important to you, learn a little bit more about our in-person trainings, including the upcoming convention as well on that e-tour. To register for that, you can register through the ACC events page or just look for the e-blast that you will be getting shortly on that. So, Casey, thank you again for presenting all this great information. We really appreciate it, and for all your service to the Chamber profession and to ACCE. And thank you to everyone for your great questions and participation. We hope you enjoyed it. We wish all of you a great afternoon, and we will see you on the next ACC webinar. Bye-bye.
Thank you.